The notification sound from Sophia's phone cut through the silence like a knife through butter. She was in the shower, humming some tune I didn't recognize anymore. Everything about my wife had become foreign lately. Her songs, her schedules, even the way she smiled at me with those perfect white teeth that now seemed more like a predator's grin. I shouldn't have looked. Any decent husband would have ignored that blue light pulsing on her iPhone screen. But something in my gut, some primal instinct honed by 33 years of reading people and systems, told me to pick it up. Can't wait to taste you again tonight. Hotel room 314, D. The world tilted sideways. My software engineer brain, trained to process complex algorithms and debug intricate code, suddenly couldn't compute the simplest equation. My wife, plus another man, equals the destruction of everything I believed in. I read the message 3 times before my hand started shaking. Damien. Had to be Damien from her marketing firm. The same Damien she'd mentioned casually over dinner for months, always with that little smile playing at her lips that I'd stupidly interpreted as professional pride. Victor? Sophia's voice drifted from the bathroom. Did my phone buzz? No, I lied, setting the device back exactly where she'd left it. My voice sounded normal, controlled. Amazing how the human mind can compartmentalize catastrophe. Nothing important. But everything was important now. Every late night she'd claimed was work. Every business trip that seemed to stretch longer than necessary. Every time she'd come home with that satisfied glow I'd attributed to career success. The shower stopped. I had maybe 2 minutes before she emerged, towel wrapped around her betraying body, to pretend I was the same trusting fool I'd been 5 minutes ago. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not code this time, but something far more complex. A plan. 3 days of surveillance confirmed what my shattered heart already knew. Sophia wasn't just cheating. She was living a double life with the enthusiasm of a method actor. The GPS tracker I'd discreetly attached to her car revealed visits to hotels, restaurants, and apartment complexes that had nothing to do with client meetings. My friend Jasper found me hunched over my computer at 2 a.m., cross-referencing credit card statements with location data. Jesus, Victor, you look like hell, he said, settling into the chair across from my home office desk. When's the last time you slept? Sleep is for people who trust their wives, I muttered, highlighting another discrepancy. Look at this. Tuesday night, she said she was at the Marriott downtown for a client dinner. Credit card shows she was at Giuseppe's across town. With him. Jasper leaned forward, his expression shifting from concern to something darker. How long? Best I can tell, 8 months, maybe longer. I turned the screen toward him. They're not even being careful anymore. Look at these charges. Same restaurants, same hotels, same times. It's like they want to get caught. So confront her. Get a lawyer. Take half of everything and move on. I shook my head. That's what a normal person would do. But normal people don't systematically dismantle 13 years of marriage for some marketing executive with good hair and a company car. What are you thinking? I closed the laptop and looked at my best friend since college. Jasper had always been the pragmatic one. The voice of reason when my engineering mind got too caught up in elegant solutions to messy problems. But this wasn't messy. This was precise. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that if someone wants to burn down my life, they should expect to get burned in return. The next morning, I started with something small. Sophia had 3 credit cards linked to our joint account. I changed the passwords and security questions on 2 of them, leaving just enough access to avoid immediate suspicion. Then I called our bank and reported unusual activity on our primary checking account, triggering a temporary freeze that would require both signatures to resolve. When Sophia's card got declined at lunch, she called me in a panic. Victor, something's wrong with our accounts. The bank is saying there's a hold? That's weird, I said, injecting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. I'll look into it. Probably just a security thing. You know how paranoid banks get these days. But I have a client lunch in an hour. Use cash. I'll have it sorted by tonight. I didn't have it sorted by tonight, or the next night, or the night after that. Each day brought new small inconveniences. Her gym membership mysteriously lapsed. Her favorite streaming services suddenly required password resets she couldn't access. Her automatic bill pays began failing one by one. It's like someone's messing with our accounts, she complained over dinner on Friday night, picking at the takeout I'd ordered because her usual grocery pickup service had somehow lost her payment information. That's paranoid thinking, I replied. cutting into my Kung Pao chicken with surgical precision. Sometimes systems just glitch. I'll call the bank Monday. But Monday brought a different kind of call. I'd spent the weekend digging deeper into Damien's digital footprint, and what I found was fascinating. The man was careless with his social media privacy settings, careless with his work email forwarding rules, and spectacularly careless with his cloud storage passwords. By Tuesday morning, Damien's colleagues had received an interesting email from his account, a detailed breakdown of client acquisition costs that made several competitors look significantly more attractive. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be explained away as an accident, but enough to raise questions about his judgment and discretion. By Thursday, his boss had called him in for a conversation about information security protocols. By Friday, Damien was working late again, but this time it wasn't voluntary. Sophia started acting different, nervous. She'd always been confident to the point of arrogance, moving through the world like someone who'd never encountered a problem her smile couldn't solve. But now she jumped when her phone buzzed, checked our accounts obsessively, and asked increasingly specific questions about our finances. "Are you sure there isn't something you're not telling me?" she asked on a Saturday morning, finding me in the garage organizing tools I hadn't touched in months. "About the bank stuff, I mean. It's been 2 weeks, Victor." What would I be hiding? I looked up from the workbench where I'd been methodically arranging screwdrivers by size. "You think I'm stealing from my own accounts?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw something I'd never seen before in 13 years of marriage. Fear. Not of me, exactly, but of something she couldn't name or control. Nothing. Forget it. But I wouldn't let her forget. That afternoon, while she was at her book club, which I knew was actually a 2-hour session at Hotel Valencia with Damien, I visited his apartment complex. Not to confront him, that would come later. Just to get a feel for his world. Damien lived in one of those trendy downtown lofts with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place a marketing executive earning 6 figures could barely afford, which explained why he drove a leased BMW and wore the same 3 expensive suits in rotation. His parking spot was easy to find. The BMW gleamed under the afternoon sun, probably detailed within the last week. I'd learned enough about Damien's schedule to know he'd be occupied for the next 90 minutes, which gave me time to get creative. I didn't damage anything. That would be crude, illegal, and ultimately unsatisfying. Instead, I focused on psychology. A few handfuls of birdseed scattered under his car would attract pigeons. Dog treats wedged into his wheel wells would bring every neighborhood pet running. And a small Bluetooth speaker, programmed to emit a barely audible high-frequency tone every few minutes, would create a subtle but persistent sense of unease whenever he approached his vehicle. Nothing traceable, nothing expensive. Just enough to make him feel like his world was slightly, inexplicably, off-kilter. The speaker was my favorite touch. I'd programmed it to activate only when it detected movement within a 5-foot radius, and the frequency was calibrated to sit just at the edge of human perception, not quite audible, but processed by the brain as a vague sense of wrongness. 3 days later, Jasper called me with news. "Your boy Damien went to the doctor," he said. "Complained about headaches and anxiety. Doc ran a full workup, found nothing wrong. Prescribed him some light anti-anxiety medication and suggested he try meditation." "How do you know this?" "His insurance claim crossed my desk at work. I handle IT security for half the medical practices in the city, remember? Patient confidentiality doesn't apply to metadata analysis." "Interesting." "Victor." Jasper's voice carried a warning. "Whatever you're doing, be careful. This isn't like debugging code. You're messing with real people's lives. They messed with mine first." That night, Sophia came home late again, clothes slightly wrinkled, hair a fraction less perfect than when she'd left. She found me in the living room, reading a book on probability theory and decision-making. "How was book club?" I asked without looking up. "Fine. We discussed The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Very good. I made a mental note to check the book club's actual reading schedule later." "Learn anything interesting?" "Just that people aren't always who they seem to be." Now I looked up. Sophia stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, and for a moment she looked like a stranger wearing my wife's face. "That's a valuable lesson." "Yes," she said quietly, "it is." The opportunity came 3 weeks later, at Marcus and Jennifer's anniversary party. Half of our social circle would be there, including several people from Sophia's company, including Damien. I'd spent days preparing for this moment, gathering information like a prosecutor building a case. Screenshots of credit card statements, GPS location logs, hotel receipts I'd retrieved from Sophia's email accounts. She'd never changed those passwords from the defaults. Even some creative detective work involving a private investigator who specialized in corporate infidelity cases. The P I had been worth every penny. His photos weren't just evidence, they were art. Sophia and Damien sharing champagne at a restaurant, entering hotel rooms, the kiss in the parking garage that lasted 43 seconds according to the timestamp. But I wasn't planning to display my evidence like some scorned husband in a bad movie. This was going to be surgical. The party was in full swing when I approached Damien at the bar. He was nursing a whiskey, looking around nervously. The past month of subtle psychological pressure had taken its toll. His usual confidence seemed forced, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. Damien, right? I extended my hand like we'd never met. Victor Hartley, Sophia's husband. He shook my hand with the grip of a man trying to project strength he didn't feel. Of course, Victor. Great to finally meet you properly. Sophia talks about you all the time. I bet she does. I signaled the bartender. Scotch, neat. Make it a double. I turned back to Damien. She talks about you too. Something flickered across his face. Fear? Guilt? We work together. Same company. I know. I accepted my drink and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. Marketing, right? Must be exciting work. All those client dinners and business trips. It has its moments. I'm sure it does. Tell me, how do you find the Hotel Valencia? Comfortable rooms? The color drained from Damien's face. He started to speak, stopped, then tried again. What do you mean? Room 314 specifically. Sophia mentioned you recommended it for out-of-town clients. Now he was looking around the party like a trapped animal, seeking escape routes. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right. I finished my scotch in one swallow, but not on my part. Before Damien could respond, I walked away, leaving him at the bar with his mouth open and his hands shaking. The first phase was complete. Let him stew in paranoia while I moved to phase 2. I found Sophia near the buffet table, laughing with Jennifer about something forgettable. She looked radiant in her black dress, the same one she'd worn to our anniversary dinner 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Having a good time? I asked, sliding up beside her. Victor! There you are. I was just telling Jennifer about our vacation plans. Vacation plans? This was news to me. The Bahamas trip we discussed. 2 weeks in paradise, just the two of us, like a second honeymoon. Jennifer cooed appropriately while I processed this new lie. We'd discussed no such trip. But then, Sophia had been discussing a lot of things with a lot of people lately. That sounds wonderful, I said. When were you thinking? Next month. I already requested the time off work. Interesting timing. Doesn't Damien have that big client presentation next month? The one that could make or break his promotion? Sophia's smile faltered slightly. I wouldn't know. We don't really discuss each other's schedules at work. Of course not. I kissed her cheek, tasting expensive perfume and cheaper lies. I'll let you get back to your conversation. I want to chat with Marcus about something. But I didn't go find Marcus. Instead, I positioned myself where I could watch both Sophia and Damien, studying their body language like a behavioral analyst. They were trying not to look at each other, which made their awareness of each other even more obvious. When she laughed, he tensed. When he moved toward the bathroom, she found an excuse to check her phone. Amateur hour. At 9:30, I made my move. The party had reached that comfortable volume where everyone was talking louder, but nobody was really listening. Perfect cover for what I had in mind. I approached the small group gathered around Marcus, who was telling some story about his early days in real estate. Sophia was there, as was Damien, along with Jennifer and 2 other couples I knew socially. Marcus, I interrupted politely, mind if I share something? It's relevant to your story about reading people in business negotiations. Of course, Victor. What's on your mind? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery I'd prepared. I've been learning about behavioral analysis lately. Fascinating stuff. For instance, did you know that most people have tells when they're lying? Micro-expressions, body language patterns, even the way they use their phones. The group was paying attention now, including Sophia, who looked curious but not yet alarmed. "Take this photo," I continued, showing them a seemingly innocent shot of the Hotel Valencia's exterior I'd taken the previous week. If I showed this to someone who'd never been there, they might look at it with casual interest, but someone who had been there, especially recently, especially under circumstances they wanted to keep private, might have a different reaction. I watched Damien's face carefully. There it was, the barely perceptible flinch, the unconscious step backward. "That's interesting," Jennifer said. "Like a psychological test." "Exactly." I swiped to the next photo, the hotel's lobby. Or this one. Most people would see expensive furniture and nice lighting, but someone who'd spent time here might notice specific details: the check-in desk layout, the elevator bank, the little seating area by the window. Sophia was frowning now, sensing something but not sure what. Damien looked like he might vomit. "Of course," I continued conversationally, "the most interesting reactions come from photos of specific locations within a place. Room numbers, for instance." I swiped again. Room 314, for example. The photo showed the hotel corridor leading to room 314, taken during my reconnaissance visit. Nothing particularly revealing, but the psychological impact was devastating. Damien actually stumbled backward, and Sophia's wine glass slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. "I don't understand," Marcus said, looking between the three of us with growing concern. "Victor, what's this about?" But I wasn't done. The fascinating thing about deception is how it creates patterns. Look at these credit card charges, for instance. I showed them screenshots I'd prepared, carefully edited to show dates, times, and locations without revealing specific account details. Tuesday, Giuseppe's restaurant. Thursday, Hotel Valencia. Saturday, Giuseppe's again. Tuesday, Hotel Valencia again. Almost like two people coordinating their schedules. "Victor." Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "Stop." "Stop what?" "I'm just sharing some interesting observations about human behavior, like how guilty people often project their guilt onto others. For instance, someone having an affair might become paranoid about their partner's activities, checking their phone, questioning their whereabouts, even suggesting couples therapy to work on trust issues." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone understood now, even if they didn't want to. Marcus looked mortified. Jennifer was staring at Sophia with undisguised shock. The other couples were backing away, like witnesses to a car accident. Damien broke first. "I should go," he mumbled, pushing through the group toward the exit. "Probably a good idea," I called after him. "Early day tomorrow, right? Assuming you still have a job." Now Sophia was crying, makeup running in perfect black streaks down her perfect cheeks. "How could you do this here? In front of everyone?" "How could I do this?" I almost laughed. "That's what you're going with?" "We need to talk, at home, privately." "We're way past private conversations, Sophia." "But you're right about one thing. We definitely need to talk." The drive home was silent, except for Sophia's occasional sniffling. I'd expected her to rage, to scream, to throw accusations at me like grenades. Instead, she sat in the passenger seat like a broken doll, staring out the window at streetlights that flashed by in hypnotic succession. It wasn't until we were in our driveway that she finally spoke. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Victor, don't." I turned off the engine and looked at her. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. But beauty without truth is just decoration, and I was done being fooled by pretty things. "Don't lie to me anymore. We're way past that." Inside the house, Sophia collapsed onto the couch like her strings had been cut. I remained standing, arms crossed, maintaining the psychological advantage. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said to her hands. "How was it supposed to happen? You and Damien ride off into the sunset while I remained obliviously grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way. It just happened. One day we were working late and 8 months, Sophia. 8 months of hotel rooms and restaurant reservations and lies. That doesn't just happen. That's a choice. Multiple choices." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I was going to tell you." "When?" after the promotion came through. After Damien got settled in his new position, we were going to do it right, with lawyers and mediation and in the meantime, I was supposed to keep playing the faithful husband while you figured out your exit strategy. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She struggled for words. And in that struggle, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion, regret maybe, or just embarrassment at being caught. I felt invisible, she finally said. In our marriage, in my career, everywhere. Like I was sleepwalking through my own life. And Damien made me feel seen again. So this is my fault. That's not what I said. It's what you implied. I walked to the window and looked out at our perfectly manicured suburban street. You felt invisible, so you made me into the fool. You felt unfulfilled, so you destroyed the life we built together. You felt like you needed more excitement, so you decided to get it by systematically lying to the person who loved you most. I never meant to hurt you. I turned back to her. That's the thing, Sophia. You did mean to hurt me. Maybe not consciously, but every time you chose him over me, every time you lied about where you were, every time you came home smelling like his cologne and pretended nothing had changed, those were choices to hurt me. You just didn't want to acknowledge what you were doing. She was crying again, but this time it looked performative, calculated. The same tears she'd used to get out of speeding tickets and smooth over conflicts with clients. What happens now? She asked. Now? I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Now you get to find out what invisible really looks like. The next morning, while Sophia was still sleeping off her emotional hangover, I made a series of phone calls. First to our insurance agent, then to our mortgage company, then to the credit card companies. By noon, I'd initiated the process of separating our joint financial responsibilities. Legally, properly, with everything documented and above board. Then I called Damien's boss. Mr. Patterson, this is Victor Hartley. I'm married to Sophia Hartley from your marketing department. I kept my voice professional, concerned. I'm calling because I'm worried about some potential conflicts of interest that might affect your company. The conversation that followed was brief but devastating. I didn't accuse anyone of anything illegal. I didn't make threats or demands. I simply expressed concern about the appearance of impropriety and suggested that perhaps the company's HR department might want to review their policies regarding employee relationships and client confidentiality. I also mentioned that I'd noticed some unusual activity on joint financial accounts that seemed connected to company expenses. And while I was sure there was an innocent explanation, perhaps it would be worth reviewing recent expenditure reports. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, both Sophia and Damien had been called into HR meetings. By the end of the week, Damien had been transferred to a different department with significantly reduced client contact and a salary cut that reflected his new, more limited responsibilities. Sophia kept her job, but the cloud of suspicion now hanging over her professional relationship with Damien made any future collaboration impossible. The promotion she'd been counting on, the one that was supposed to fund her new life, evaporated like morning fog. But I wasn't done. The private investigator I'd hired had been thorough in his documentation. While I couldn't use the photos in divorce proceedings without potentially violating privacy laws, there was nothing stopping me from sharing them with the right people at the right time. Like Damien's ex-wife, who'd been seeking evidence of infidelity to modify their custody arrangement. Like the professional networking groups where both Sophia and Damien were active members, shared anonymously through carefully untraceable accounts. Like the anonymous tip I sent to the local business journal about conflicts of interest in the marketing industry, complete with generalized examples that anyone familiar with recent personnel changes at Sophia's company would easily recognize. I wasn't destroying their lives. I was simply making their choices visible. They'd gambled on secrecy, on the ability to compartmentalize their deception, on my continued ignorance. I was calling in their bet. 3 months later, Sophia moved out of our house. She'd found a studio apartment across town, the kind of place recent college graduates rented while they got their feet under them. The kind of place a 30-year-old marketing executive would never have imagined living in during the height of her affair-fueled confidence. Damien had moved too, though not by choice. His ex-wife had successfully modified their custody agreement, and his reduced salary meant he could no longer afford the downtown loft. Last I heard, he was renting a room from a coworker and taking public transportation to work. The divorce proceedings were remarkably smooth. With everything documented and no realistic chance of claiming ignorance, Sophia's lawyer advised her to accept the settlement I proposed through my attorney. She got the car and half of our liquid savings. I got the house, the retirement accounts, and the satisfaction of watching her realize that her great adventure had cost her everything she'd actually valued. The final papers were signed on a Tuesday morning in a conference room that smelled like industrial coffee and broken dreams. Sophia wore a black suit I'd never seen before, probably bought secondhand given her new financial reality. She looked older, smaller somehow, as if her reduced circumstances had actually shrunk her physical presence. "Any final questions?" the mediator asked, shuffling through the stack of documents we'd both signed. "Just one," Sophia said quietly. She looked across the table at me with something that might have been curiosity. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. But revenge, I'd discovered, was less about hatred and more about balance, about restoring equilibrium to a universe that had been knocked askew by selfishness and deception. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate you. I don't really feel anything about you anymore. You're just someone I used to know who made some very expensive choices." She nodded like she'd expected that answer, though I saw her wince slightly at the word expensive. "For what it's worth," she said, "I am sorry. Not just about getting caught, but about all of it. I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I took you down with me. The difference is, I climbed back up. You're still falling." After the paperwork was filed and the lawyers had shaken hands, I walked to my car in the courthouse parking lot. The autumn air was crisp, full of the promise of winter and new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper, asking if I wanted to grab dinner and celebrate my freedom. I did want that. I wanted dinner with friends and weekends without wondering where my wife really was, and the simple pleasure of trusting the people in my life. I wanted to date eventually, to find someone who understood that love was a choice you made every day, not a feeling that justified any behavior. But first, I wanted to go home, to my house now, and sit in the quiet of my own space, without the undercurrent of deception that had poisoned the air for 8 months. As I drove through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I thought about the conversation at Marcus and Jennifer's party, about reading people and behavioral analysis and the tells that give away deception. I'd become very good at reading people lately, at seeing the gaps between what they said and what they meant. It was a useful skill, though I hoped I'd never need it quite so extensively again. I pulled into my driveway and looked at the house Sophia and I had bought together 7 years ago. The same house she'd shared with me while she was falling in love with someone else. The same house she'd left every Tuesday and Thursday evening to meet her lover at various hotels around the city. But it wasn't the same house anymore. It was mine now, free and clear, full of possibility instead of betrayal. I'd changed the locks, updated the passwords on all the accounts, and even bought new sheets for the bed. Small gestures, maybe, but important ones. Inside, I made myself a sandwich and opened a beer. Simple pleasures that felt luxurious after months of careful planning and calculated moves. The silence was peaceful rather than oppressive, the kind of quiet that came from the absence of secrets rather than the absence of sound. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized Damien's voice immediately when I answered. "We need to talk," he said, without preamble. "No," I replied calmly. "We don't. You destroyed my life, my career, my relationship with my kids, everything. You destroyed your life. I just made your choices visible to the people who deserve to know about them. I loved her. Then you should have divorced your wife and married her honestly. Instead, you chose to sneak around like a teenager, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that choice. This isn't over." "Yes," I said. "It is." I hung up and blocked his number. Some people, I'd learned, never accepted responsibility for their actions. They preferred to blame others, to cast themselves as victims of circumstances rather than architects of their own destruction. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I finished my beer and looked around my kitchen. Really looked at it. The way you examine something you're seeing for the first time. The afternoon light coming through the windows cast everything in golden tones, and for the first time in months, I felt something approaching contentment. The revenge was complete. Not because I'd hurt them, though I had, but because I'd restored balance. Sophia and Damien had made choices that prioritized their immediate gratification over everyone else's well-being. Now they were living with the natural consequences of those choices, while I was free to make new choices of my own. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability. It was about ensuring that actions had appropriate consequences, that people couldn't simply take what they wanted without paying the price. I'd paid my price. 13 years of marriage, the trust I'd given freely, the future I'd imagined we'd share.
Now they were paying theirs. The balance was restored. The books were closed. The story was over, was over, was over, was over, was over, was over, was over.